What if I told you the thing we celebrate the most, keep prices, might actually be the biggest danger to the global economy? Because behind every low price tag hides a disturbing question. How can an entire world run on goods so cheap they don't even make sense? And who pays the hidden cost? Today, we're digging into a mystery that economists hint at, but rarely expose openly. What happens when everything becomes too cheap to survive? When nations depend on prices that no healthy economy can sustain, and how China accidentally built a system so enormous, so efficient, and so artificially cheap that the rest of the world walked right into a trap without realizing it. But this story isn't just about China Eats. About us, our jobs, our supply chains, our governments, and our future. And by the end, you might realize the global economy you thought you understood is running on borrowed time. To understand this trap, we must go back to the late 1970s, when China was not the manufacturing giant it is today, but an impoverished nation searching for survival. Then came Deng Xiaoping, a reformer whose strategy changed the world. Open China's economy, attract foreign companies, use low labor costs as the irresistible bait, and scale manufacturing to a level no nation had ever attempted. This was when the world had its first taste of cheap, but nobody realized how addictive it would become. Major American and European companies rushed in. Apple, Nike, Walmart, suppliers mesmerized by China's ability to produce anything for a fraction of the global cost. Soon, the West outsourced factories, industrial capacity, jobs, and entire supply chains. This wasn't globalization, it was dependence, and once the world got hooked on cheap prices, the trap slowly began to close. The real question is, how did China make goods so cheap that even other developing nations couldn't compete? The answer lies in three powerful layers. First, China had a massive, low-cost labor force, eager to work for wages far below global standards. Second, the government offered extreme support, tax holidays, subsidies, free land, cheap energy, and entire highways, ports, and factories built specifically for foreign investors. Many factories sold products below their real cost because subsidies covered the gap. And third, unlike the West, which builds companies, China builds entire industries, whole cities dedicated to shoes, electronics, tools, toys, and textiles. This industrial coordination had never been seen in human history. But once prices stay artificially low for too long, they stop being prices and become weapons-killing competition, killing local industries and killing any country's ability to produce for itself. And by the early 2000s, the world didn't just buy from China, it depended on China. Slowly, the trap tightened. Western factories shut down. Entire American towns hollowed out. European manufacturing shrank. Developing countries like Brazil, Mexico, and South Africa were crushed by prices they could not match. Millions lost jobs not because of automation, but because offshoring was more profitable. Consumers demanded lower prices, companies demanded higher margins, and politicians avoided difficult truths. Meanwhile, China's industrial engine grew into something gigantic and unstoppable. But even China couldn't outrun the laws of economics forever. Cracks began to appear. Labor costs rose. Workers moved into cities and demanded higher pay. The 2008 financial crisis destroyed global demand. China had built factories based on infinite consumption, but the real world doesn't buy infinitely. And the biggest crack of all, overproduction. China had built more factories, apartments, highways, steel mills, and power plants than the world actually needed. So, to pay off the debt taken to build these factories, companies produced even more goods, even though demand was shrinking. Prices fell further. This wasn't efficiency anymore, it was desperation. The results were devastating worldwide. European steel collapsed. American textile and furniture industries vanished. Latin American electronics plants shut down. Countries lost the ability to make their own essential goods. Innovation slowed because why invest in developing new products when you can import the cheapest version? Meanwhile, China's internal problems exploded. Real estate debt, local government financial collapse, falling birth rates, shrinking workforce, oversupply in almost every industry, and deflation, the nightmare scenario where prices fall because nobody wants to buy anything. By now, the world had built itself around the assumption that China would always stay cheap, but that assumption is collapsing. Governments tried, tariffs didn't work, factories didn't return. They tried manufacturing incentives, not enough. You can't rebuild 30 years of lost industry overnight. They tried diversifying to Vietnam, India, and Mexico, helpful. But none have China's scale, logistics, or speed. And consumers, they say they want ethical, durable, local goods, until it's time to pay more. Then they choose cheap again. Cheap has become a global addiction. Today, we're seeing the consequences everywhere. China faces deflation because factories are producing products the world doesn't need. Ghost cities and ghost factories show that China built a future bigger than its reality. The global supply chain is fragile. When factory closure in China can empty shelves across continents. Other countries are now racing to the bottom, lowering wages and standards to compete, creating instability everywhere. Young people globally have lost industrial knowledge. We became consumers instead of creators. The same pattern now appears in other sectors. Agriculture, energy, and medicine, where cheap solutions crush sustainable ones. And this leads us to the real revelation. What happens when everything becomes too cheap to survive? You kill innovation. You kill wages. You kill domestic industries. You weaken national security. You destroy economic diversity. And you create systems so fragile that one shock can collapse them entirely. Cheap creates fragility. Fragility creates crises. Crises are expensive. Cheap is never truly cheap. Someone always pays workers, companies, towns, countries, or future generations. Dependency weakens nations. Countries that cannot produce what they need lose control over their destiny. And sustainability requires sacrifice. If we want durable products, strong economies, and stable futures, we must be willing to pay the real cost of production instead of chasing fantasy prices. Because the world can survive expensive goods. What it cannot survive is a global system built on artificially cheap illusions. The moment cheap becomes impossible, the entire world economy will have to rewrite itself. And that transition will be painful. If you found this breakdown eye-opening and want more deep dives into the hidden mechanics shaping our world, like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because in the next episode, we uncover the financial strategies governments use to make you feel richer than you actually are, and why the truth is even more disturbing. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay prepared.